This is a special presentation brought to you by the Daf Map, based on one of the lectures given by HaRav Yehonasan Berger Shlita. Please check out our other videos and shiurim at www.thedafmap.com.
Today's shiur begins at the top of Daf Samach Gimel. You'll notice a Mishnah. Nazir shegileach v'noda lo shehu tameh. A Nazir completed his Nazirus observance, and on the 31st day, meaning he observed 30 days of Nazirus, and then haircut day came, we'll say day 31, and he took the haircut and discovered that he was Tameh. The Rashi at the top, Nazir shegilech tiglachas taro b'yoyim shloishim ve'echad shelo, the tiglachas at the completion of Nazirus observed without defilement, and that is on the 31st day. Rashi continues, v'achar shegileach noda lo shu tameh betumas meis, and then it became known to him that he had encountered defilement of the dead. Bein shenitma b'soich melois, bein shenitma li'achar melois. Bo bayom. Whether the tumah was within the actual Nazirus days, or the tumah was after the Nazirus days that day, namely day 31, koidem shehevi korbanosov v'shegileach, before the haircut, before bringing of sacrifices. So now, we have a case of a Nazir that reached day 31 and discovered that he was Tameh. The Mishnah continues, Im Tuma Yedua Soser. Vim Tumas Tahoim Eino Soser. Tuma Yedua means Tuma that was known to others. Rashi, Im Tuma Yedua Hoiso Bisha Shenitma. If it was Tuma that was known to others at the time he became Tameh. Harezis Soser es HaKoil. He loses credit for everything. In other words, all the Nazirus that he observed, he has to start all over again. Rashi goes on, Avol im lo nitmo ad la'achar havoas korbanosov, if his encounter with Tumah was after he brought the sacrifices, afilu betumah yedua eino soser elo zayin. Now, this is a case where he brought the sacrifices but did not yet take the haircut. So he loses then 7 days. One, a Nazir that had one of the sacrifices processed and the blood was sprinkled. So we continue in our Mishnah. So far, our Mishnah is describing a Nazir that reached day 31 and discovered Tumah. If it's the Tumah that is Yedua, then it will cause him to start again. If it's Tumas Tahom, we'll see what that means. The Tumah of the depths in a literal sense. He doesn't lose. Im ad shelo gileach, if prior to the haircut the Tumah became known to him, bein kach ubein kach soser, whether it's Tumah Yedua, known Tumah, or Tumah of the depths, Tumah that's hidden from the public, he will lose out. In other words, he'll have to start his Nazirus again. Ketzad. An illustration of what we've been saying. Yorad litbol b'ma'ora, v'nimtso meis tsof alpi ha'ma'ora, tomei. The Nazir went to immerse himself in a cave, and there was discovered later a piece of corpse flesh floating on the water. He is deemed to be Tameh. Nimtsa meshuka b'karka mora, if the piece of corpse flesh was found buried under the floor of the cave, then it depends. Yorad lahoker tahor. If the Nazir went into the cave to immerse in water to cool off, so he remains tahor. That's what we mean by Tumah Satahom. The unknown Tumah doesn't affect him. Litoyer mitumas meis. If the purpose of the Nazir was entering the cave to immerse because he had been Tomei, and he was immersing for purification purposes, then even though you're dealing with hidden Tumah, he will be considered defiled. Shecheskas Tomei Tomei, one who had the status of being defiled, remains thusly. V'cheskas Tohor Tohor, someone who had the status of being pure, he went into the cave to immerse for comfort purposes, for cooling off. So he maintains his status of Tara. Sheraglayim Lodovar. Rashi explains on the second line under the Gemara text, Sheraglayim Lodovar, Klomar, Shadvorim Nirim Kach. This is the way things appear. The Tor, Hamed Alches Koso. Someone who had been Tor prior to that remains with his Tor status. The Tomei Alches Koso. And one who had been Tomei remains thusly. V'teve Cheskas Tor, Tor v'Cheskas Tomei, Tomei. Mino Hani Mili. From where do we know that Tumah Yedua, known Tumah, undoes Nazirus, undoes the days that were observed? This sounds like a fairly basic question, but we're asking this question in the context of Tumah Yedua versus Tumah Satahom, the case of the hidden Tumah that is not so ser. On the side, we have a Nosay Mivneh heading. Nosay being the topic heading, Mivneh structural note. We have diamonds. They highlight, you'll see in the Gemara the names Rav Ozer and Reish Lakish. These are Makoros, sources. Darak Tumah Yedua Soseres Velo Tumah Satahom. That only known Tumah is capable of undoing observed days of Nazirus that were observed, but not Tumah discovered in the depths, a hidden Tumah. The Gemara. Omar Rebbe Ozer, Omar Kra. The pasuk says, "V'chiyomus meis olav bepesa pisoim." Note that this pasuk is from the topic of Nazirus itself, and it describes a death taking place. And we say the word olav in this pasuk means b'mechuveres lo. Mechuveres means something clear to him. So if the Nazir encountered a type of tumah that is clear to him, that would cause him to lose the observed days of Nazirus. Not tumah that is hidden. Reish Lakish Omar Kra. Here we cite a pasuk from the topic of Pesach Sheni, someone who was obligated or should have done the Korban Pesach on the 15th of Nisan, but he was Tomei or was B'derach Rechoika. The Torah gives him another opportunity, a make-up opportunity, on the 14th of Iyar. So the pasuk in that context says, Ki etomei linefesh o b'derech rechoika. We should point out that the laws of Nazir are learned together with the laws of Korban Pesach, so that even though we're citing a pasuk from the topic of Korban Pesach, it applies equally to Nazirus. We learn from this Ki derech. The pasuk mentioned a person who was Tomei Lenefesh, that means he was experienced Tumas Meis, or he was far away from Yerushalayim. But there's a comparison. Ki derech, like a road. Ma derech begolui, just like a road is exposed. Af kol begolui, so too all that is exposed. In other words, the encounter with the Tumas Meis, with the death, with the corpse flesh, would have to be in an open, exposed fashion, as opposed to Tahom, something in the depths, something hidden. Well, we have psukim, so we ask the following. We have a Tanaic source, Ezu Tumas HaTahom, what is categorized as Tumas HaTahom, Tuma of the deaths, Kol She'eno Makiro Echod B'sof Ha'olam. A situation of Tuma where no one in any part of the world is aware of it. Avo Makiro Echod B'sof Ha'olam. If someone somewhere in the world is aware of the Tumah, Ein Zu Tumas HaTahom. We cannot consider this as Tumas HaTahom. Someone out there is aware of it. Bishlamo Lemandamar Ki Derech Shapir. The idea of exposed Tumah versus Tumas HaTahom is defined by the road example. So then this is fine. In other words, according to Reish Lakish, this is fine. What do we mean by that? Well, if someone out there in the wide world is aware of the Tumah, it's considered exposed. It's like a road. It's exposed. It's exposed to somebody. But according to Rav Ozer, that said that Tumas Meis plays a role, is soser, can void, if it's clear to him, to the Nazir himself, Ki makira echad b'soif ha'olam mai have. So what? Someone out there at the far reaches of the world knows about the Tumah. It's not known to him. So this source would represent we'll say, a challenge, a problem for the source, the posuk and the drasha that Rebbe Ozer cited. Vesu, and furthermore, Rashi points out that this question is a question regardless of who you want to choose, whether you choose the mechuveres lo pshat or the comparison to the derech, namely whether you choose Rebbe Ozer or Reish Lakish. The following is raised. Ha desanya hamoitze meis mushkav l'rachba shel derech. It's discovered that there is a corpse lying underneath a pathway. In other words, the length of the body is perpendicular to the road, so that the width of the road is on top of a body, so that if someone was walking there, so underneath the path, there would have been a body. Now, Tosefos points out this is a case of Tumas HaTahom. It's not known at the time that the person walked by, he didn't know about it. Betruma Tomei, if you're dealing with a Kohen that wants to eat Truma, we will tell him, no, you cannot eat the Truma, you have become defiled. Ben Nazir Vasiyas Pesach Tor. But if you're dealing with a Nazir or someone who is on his way to do a Korban Pesach, we will say, you are Tahor. Well, my Shna, what difference does it make? Once you tell me that the concept of Tumas Tahom is one of non-defilement based on psukim, meaning it's a d'oraisa concept, why should there be any distinction between Truma versus Nazir and Osa Pesach? Ella, a second approach altogether. Ella Tumas HaTahom Gemara Gemiri Law. The concept of Tumas HaTahom as being Tohor with regard to Nazir and Oisa Pesach, only this is an oral tradition. So that the concept of Tumas HaTahom being considered Torah, as we just said, it applies only to the Nazir and Osa Pesach. And it therefore comes as no surprise that for someone who wants to eat Truma, and Truma consumption must be done in a state of purity, he will not be able to do so because of this body that he walked over, buried under the road, even though it was not known to anybody at the time. Im ad shelo gilach, our Mishnah said that if prior to the haircut, even though the Nazir brought his korban, if the discovery of the tumah was before the haircut, so even if it was an encounter with tumas tahom, the Nazir loses out. Soser. So now the Gemara. Man Tana. Who is the Tana that would hold that opinion? Omar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Ozer he. Omar Tiglachas Me'akeves. This is in accordance with Rabbi Ozer that says that the haircut is a binding or restrictive factor in the Nazir being released from his Nazirus restrictions. So in a manner of speaking, until the haircut, he's still in the midst of his Nazirus. And therefore, discovery of Tumah, even if it's Tumah Satahom, at that point causes soser, stira, loss. And of course, the Nazir will have to make up. Boy Rami Bar Chama. Before we continue in the Gemara, we want to give a brief headline to this Gemara. On the side, under the Nosay, the topic heading, we've written, Tumah b'soich malois. The actual encounter with the Tumah was within the Nazir days. V'yidiyasa achar malois. And the discovery afterwards. Ma dinoi legabi stira. What is the law with regard to loss? So that you have on the one hand the encounter during or in the midst of the Nazirus, and the discovery of that encounter after he completed observing the Nazirus. Boy Rami Bar Chama, we're in the Gemara. Rami Bar Chama asks this issue, this question. Nitma b'soich malois. He had the encounter with the Tumas Tahom within the days of his Nazirus observance. V'noda lo li'achar malois. And it was revealed to him that there had been let's say, a piece of corpse under the floor or under the road, as we described earlier, and it became known to him after Malos, meaning after he finished observing the Nazirus days. However, before he brought the sacrifices and before he took the haircut, Mahu. What is he to do? What is the din? Boser yadio azlinon v'yadio achar malosi. Do we emphasize the time of discovery? And the discovery was after the Malos. It was after he completed observing all of the Nazirus days. And the result would be that he would lose only 7 days, as Tosefos presents this matter. Or maybe we don't emphasize the time of discovery, but rather the time of the actual encounter. And the encounter with the Tumas HaTahoim was within the Nazirus days. Ulamai, and with regard to what are we asking this question? Lemistar, regarding the issue of loss and need to make up days. Mistar is the voidance or the cancellation of days that he observed, and then the need to make them up. We look at the Tosefos, the second line from the bottom. Boy, Rami Bar Chama, Nitma Toich Malois. Now Tosefos adds a point that we didn't mention because our initial presentation was based on Rashi, but here Tosefos says he was Nitma Toich Malois Betuma Yedua Oy Betuma Satahom, either with actual Tuma, known Tuma, or Tuma Satahom. Rashi, regarding this, you'll note he says, Boy Rami Bar Chama Nitma Betuma Satahom. He does not mention Tuma Yedua. And the issue then is that the in contact with the Tumah was during the counting days, during the actual days of Nazirus observance. The Tosefos goes on, V'noda lo li'achar melos kodem giluach l'Reb Elazar mahu. And the discovery of his encounter with the Tumah was after he completed the 30 days of Nazirus, before he took his haircut, according to Reb Elazar. Reb Elazar said, if you remember, that the haircut was a binding factor. Mahu. Boser Tumah azlinon v'soiser shloishim. Do we emphasized the time of the tumah, and that was in the midst of the Nazirus, and therefore he would lose 30 days. In other words, he would lose all of the Nazirus. He'd have to count from the beginning. El Basar Yedio Azlinan, or do we emphasize the time of discovery, and then the Soser Shiva, he would lose only 7 days. The Gemara continues on Omid Beis. Omar Rava Tashma. Now notice we have a long answer marking. Now this long answer marking is based on the Tosefos in Dibur Masel Va'adayin. Let's read the Tosefos together to justify our marking. Va'adayin Tiboy Aloch. This Dibur Masel is from the 4th line from the top of the Gemara. Hashas holech umeforish hach pshitusa de Rava derech kashya v'tirutz ve'af bayo de Rami bar Chama holech umeforish hata'am ba'orech. So the Gemara will be explaining Rava and also dealing with Rami bar Chama's question in a, we'll say, lengthy fashion. So let's continue with the Gemara. Omar Rava Tashma, a quote from our Mishnah. Imad shelo gilach, if the Nazir became aware of the tumah before his haircut, benkach ubenkach soser. Whether it's tumah yedua, or whether it was an encounter with exposed tumah, or with hidden tumah, soser, he loses out. Heichi domi. Well, what are the circumstances of this Mishnah? If he became aware in the middle of his counting days, the Mishnah itself said he became aware before the haircut. Well, when before the haircut? If in the middle of his Nazir's days, do you need to be told that soser, that he loses out? Of course he loses out. It's a case of a Nazir having encountered tumah in the midst of his Nazirus. Elolav li'achar molois. So rather, it's a case of encounter with tumah. It's a that he becoming familiar with the problem, discovery of tumah encounter when after molois, and it says in the Mishnah soser. So shma mina. So this shows us that we'll say the emphasis is placed on not the time of discovery per se, but the time of the actual encounter with the tumah. So you have a case of there was encounter with tumah during the Nazir's period and discovery of it afterwards, and yet it says soser. Va'adayin tiboy aloch, but there remains still unrevealed or unsolved information. Kulo soser or shiva soser. How much does he lose out? Does he lose out all of the Nazirus, or does he lose out only 7 days? Well, leman. Now this question is raised according to whom? Ilemo l'Rabbanan pshita de kulo soser. If this question is raised according to the Rabbanan, it's obvious that he'll lose out everything, because we're talking about his discovery before he brought the sacrifices. We mentioned the quote from the Mishnah said before he took the haircut, but we're going to assume not only before he took the haircut, but before he brought the sacrifices. So then it would be obvious, as far as the Rabbanan are concerned, he loses everything. V'i l'Reb Ozer. But if it's a question, if we're asking our question according to the Tana Reb Ozer, then kol achar malos shiva soser. Any, let's say, discovery of tumah after the malos would result only in a loss of 7 days. So why are you asking the question? Omar loch. So the Gemara answers Hani Mili. Rami bar Chama will tell you. Rabbi bar Chama is the one who asked the question initially, so he'll tell you this idea of losing 7, that's kinitvo achar malos, v'hai lifnei malosu. That's a case where a person encountered the tumah after malos, but here he encountered the tumah before the malos. O dilma, shiny hacha, or maybe this is different. Diadia achar malosi, that the discovery of the encounter was after the malos. So our question still is a valid question to ask. Umina, and we can now answer it from the Mishnah itself. Katani, benkach ubenkach soser, v'lo komifligi. We take a look at Rashi. In the narrow lines, a little more than halfway down the narrow lines. Hochi garsinu mina, hodi katani, benkach ubenkach soser, v'lo komiflig, shma mina, klomar, v'tifshot leim emasnisin gufei. Let us conclude the question from the Mishnah itself, the Midiktoni, benkach ubenkach soser, v'lo komaflig, bein hecha dinitma koidem malois, bein la'achar malois. The Mishnah makes no distinction whether the encounter with the tumah was before the malos, before the completion of the Nazir's observance, or afterwards. Deha masnisin kol emas dinitma b'mashma. The Mishnah indicates whenever he became tamei. Vu kimnalo k'Reb Ozer, and we set up the Mishnah like Reb Ozer. Diamar kol achar malos zayin soser v'sulo. We said that our Mishnah was in accordance with Reb Ozer. And Reb Ozer speaks about loss of days, loss of 7 days, no more. Shma mina, from here we conclude, nami dafilu hecha denitma b'soch malois, even where the encounter with the tumah was within the Nazir's observed days, kevan diyadil achar malosu, since the discovery of the tumah was after the malos, the zayin soser v'sulo, he loses only 7 days and not any more. Before we continue in the Gemara, let us glance at the side. We have a Nosay, a topic heading, where we've written Matzavim Shonim, different situations, Shel Metzias Meis Baderech, regarding the discovery of a corpse on or under a road. Under what circumstances will we say that this represents tumas hatahom? As we go through the source, we will notice some markings. The markings are indicated under our Mivneh heading, where you see Bamed Vumamurim abbreviated. That expression will be highlighted with a triangle as we go along. Bamed Vumamurim is an expression of qualification, and will be qualifying in one of two directions. Either we will be saying, well, under what circumstances do we declare tumah? And then the Gemara will contrast it with the word avol. As you'll see, we squiggle under an avol, but under different circumstances, then we will say the opposite. So we're going to try to keep track, as we go through this source, directions in the direction of tumah, or are we going in the direction of tahara? And at each juncture, then we will present you with a contrasting case. Sounds a little bit abstract. Let's see it applied. The Gemara. Tonu Rabbanan hamotzei meis muto l'rachba shel derech. A person discovers a body lying underneath a path perpendicular to the path, so that the width of the path is covering a body lying across it, but underneath. L'truma tamei ubenozir v'ubayse pesach tor. If upon discovery of this, I walked over the path, and I'm a person that needs to eat truma, I'm a kohen, and I want to eat truma, we'll say, no, you can't eat the truma. If you're a Nazir or someone on your way to do a Korban Pesach, we'll say you remain unaffected. Now, here we have a triangle with the point facing up, so we're going in the direction of Tumah. So it means, under what circumstances will we say that there's Tumah for the Oiseh, for the Truma man, for the Kohen that wants to eat Truma? She'ein loy mokoim la'avor. The body is lying in such a way that the length of the body is covered by the width of the road. Avol yesh loi mokom lavor af litruma tohor. However, if there is room to pass, then even if his purpose was to eat truma, he remains tohor. So notice we said, when is it that we say there is tuma for the truma purposes? And then we avol. Notice the contrast. However, if it's these circumstances, that yesh mokum lavor, there's a way to walk over the path without walking over the body, so then he will be tohor, even for truma purposes. So up till this point, we're saying that if the body covers the entire width of the path, I say covers, but of course it means underneath the path. So for truma purposes, he is tomei. There was no way for him to go over the path without having been over the body, overshadowing the body. With regard to Nazir and Nosay Pesach, the oral tradition that we learned earlier kicks in, and here you have a case of tumas atahom. The body was not known to anybody to be over there at the time that the gentleman walked over it. So with regard to Nazir and Nosay Pesach, the law of tumas atahom says that they remain tohor. Even with regard to truma, we pointed out that if there was a way to walk over that path without walking over the body, that's called yesh lo derech lavor. Even for truma, we would say he is okay. Now, let's continue. Ba'med v'mamurim. Again, you notice that we have the triangle with the point facing up. So we're stating in the direction of Tuma, Bamevurun Shemotzei Sholem. When is it that we say that there is Tuma? In the case of Ein Mokom La'avor, that's when the body was found whole. Avol Meshubar O Mefurok, Afilu Ein Mokom La'avor, Chayshinon Shemo Bein Purokin Ovar. Now the word chayshinon here, in my opinion, is a very tricky word. Chayshinon oftentimes is in the direction of stringency. We're choshesh for, we take into consideration some concern to be stringent. Here, it's quite the opposite. We said that if you have a situation of ein mokom lavor, in other words, the body spans the entire width of the path, there will be tumah for the truma person. That's where the body was found complete. However, if the body is found, let us say, for illustration purposes, we're going to keep it simple, it's broken into two parts. And if you look in the Rosh, at the very bottom of the page, you have a star, second line from the bottom, Avol motzo mishuber lechatichos umefuk devorim afilu ein lo mokum lavor. Even if there's no place to walk, meaning in reality, the body, the length of the body really covers the entire width of the path. However, the two pieces of body are not next to each other. They're not in a continuum. And as the Rosh says, Afilu ein mokum lavor kigon hachatzi hameis mutal betzad yamin ad chatzi aderech o rubo. V'chatzi o acher muflog heimenu. Muflog means a little further down the road. Mitzad smolo ad chatzi aderech o rubo. If you look at, we have a little illustration, an aerial view where you see, say, chelik min hameis, an indication where the halfway mark is. And if you were to walk on a straight path, you will definitely be overshadowing body. That's what we mean, ein lo mokom lavor. There is no way to traverse the path without overshadowing the dead if you walk in a straight line. So the Rosh goes on to say V'halech derech yishara lefonav ef sheshaliya al chatzi or acher. If you're going to take a straight line over this on this path, it's impossible to avoid overshadowing. Afilu achitohor. Even so, we will declare tahara shanutelim shalikem darko. We are going to explain away the tumah by saying that he was ikem darko. He took a twist in the path. He did not walk a straight line, resulting in his, in effect, avoiding the tumah. So we go back to our Gemara. You'll notice that we have brackets in the Gemara. The reason for the brackets are explained on the side. Tamha Sugrayim. We're going to have another qualification remark after the brackets. Masbir Mashe Kotoni Lifnei Sugrayim is coming to explain what we just said. So we'll skip the brackets initially. Let's go over what we just said. In fact, we can go back to the most recent triangle. When is it that we said that in a case of Ein Mokom Lavor, there is no room to cross the path without going over the body, that there will be Tumah for the Truma person? That's where the body was found complete. Avol Meshuba Mufurok, broken or in pieces. Afilu Ein Mokom Lavor, even if there's no way to traverse the path, if you're taking a straight route without overshadowing, nevertheless, Chayshinon Shemo Bein Prokim Ovar. We will take into consideration that maybe he took a twisted route in his walk and avoided the body, as our illustration hopefully demonstrates. Skipping the brackets, Bamed Vamamurim. Now note, here we have an inverted triangle indicating Tahara. When is it that we said in the case of Mefurok there would be Tahara? That is B'malech B'raglov. That's if the fellow is walking on his own 2 feet. He's walking on his own 2 feet. He walks kind of like in an upright position, and he might have taken a curve around the body parts that we illustrated before, but he's maintaining a fairly erect posture as he's walking along. That's Mahalech Baraglov, literally walking on his own feet. Avol. And now here this is a contrast, where we're going to go now in the direction of Tumah. Avol ta'uno rachuv tamei. If the fellow walking is carrying a burden upon him, or he is riding on something, in other words, he's not walking on his own 2 feet. So there's going to be a lot of shaking from side to side, either because of the heaviness of the burden upon you, or because of the fact that you're not walking on your own power, but you're walking on the back of an animal. So there's this shifting back and forth motion. And as a result of that, so you're going to inevitably overshadow some part of the body, even though it's mefurok. Again, we have a bracketed section, because within the brackets there's simply an explanation that we just offered orally, and we skipped the brackets initially. Bamed v'amurim, and again, notice the triangle point up, meaning under what circumstances will we go in the direction of... let us just correct ourselves momentarily. The triangle that we see now is, you see with the point facing down, indicating under what circumstances will we go in the direction of Tahara. That's Bamed V'amumurim Betumas Hatahom. That's when the whole issue was a concern of hidden Tumah. Avol Tumah Yedua. But when you're dealing with exposed tumah, shloshton tameim, meaning even the Nazir and the Oisa Pesach, in addition to the Oichel Truma. We did a lot of skipping along the way, so we must go back over the text with the brackets. So we're going to go back to the first bracketed section, after having mentioned that there will be tumah in a case of ein mokum lavor. That's only when the body was found complete. But if the body was found Mishubur Mefurok, then even if Ein Mokom Lavor, we're going to assume Tahara. However, in the brackets, Ubekever, Afilu Mishubur Mefurok Tomei, Mivneh She Kever Mitzarfo. If what was found under the road wasn't just a body, but a grave, and in the grave you had the body severed, as we illustrated before, nevertheless, the fact that it's a grave, it attaches everything so that there is no more any option of having taken the crooked route as being a saving effort. The grave is considered one continuous entity, so that if you were walking over a grave, even though you might not have been walking directly over a part of the body in the grave is considered, let's say in simplistic terms, as if the body is complete. The expression mitzarfa means it joins up the pieces to be like complete. We continue from that point in the Gemara Bamed Vamurim, and when is it that in the case of Mefurok we say there is Tahara? That's B'mahalech Baraglov. If the fellow was walking on his own locomotion, under his own power. Avotono Rochuv Tome. If he is carrying a burden or he's riding on the back of an animal and there's going to be swaying to and fro, he will be Tomei, even though the body was Mefurok. And now the explanation of that. Someone who's walking upright on his own 2 feet, it's quite possible that he won't come into contact, he won't cause any movement of corpse pieces, nor will he necessarily overshadow. If, however, he has a burden that he is carrying or he's riding on an animal, it's impossible that he would avoid all of these possibilities, that he wouldn't touch or not cause movement or overshadow. In our explanation, we emphasize the overshadow possibility because up till now we were viewing this as the body being buried under the road. So when is it that we say that if there's no mokoim lavor, there will be tahara betumas hatahom? That's when you're dealing with something totally unknown. It's hidden tumah. It's buried. The body was buried under the road. Avol tuma yadua shloshta tmeim. However, if it's tumah that is known, then all three, whether it's the Nazir or the Oiser Pesach and the Ochel Truma, they'll also all be declared to be Tomei. Ve'ezui Tumas HaTahom, what is meant by Tumas Tom? Kol she'ein makira echad b'soifa oilam. Tumah that's not known by anyone in any part of the world. In other words, no one knows about the Tumah. Makira echad b'soifa oilam ein zu Tumas HaTahom. If someone, even if he be located now in the far reaches of the planet, knows about the tumah, it's not considered tumas hatahom. So the knowledge of the body being buried under the road is enough to declassify it from tumas hatahom, and hence will need to apply the stringency of tumah. If a body, let us say, was buried under straw or pebbles, that could be tumas tom. In other words, if no one knows about the body over there, that's tumas tom. However, if a body is found at sea or in the dark or in clefts in rocks, the body is not covered. Ein zu tumas hatahom. This is not considered tumas hatahom. Since the body is not covered, it's something that could be discovered by people. V'lo omru tumas hatahom elo lemeis bilvad. The concept of tumas hatahom as being the basis of tahara, as we've described till now, this has applicability only to the realm of defilement to the dead, corpse defilement. However, not with regard to other areas of tumah like zav and zava. We're not going to elaborate on that now, realizing, however, I'm sure everyone knows that there are many different forms of defilement, sources of defilement, and the concept of tumas tumas being restricted to the realm of corpse or tumas meis. Ketzad yorad. Well, this is of course a quote from our Mishnah, and we're going to now make mention of the point in the Mishnah of tzaf. We saw the tumah, the corpse flesh, floating. That was a point mentioned in the Mishnah. And here we're not going to focus on tumas meis, but the thrust of the Gemara is a focus on tumas sheretz. On the side of the Gemara, tumah, under our Nosay, our topic heading, we've written tumah tsafa b'tumas sheretz. Floating tumah with regard to defilement to a sheretz is reference to one of 8 different creatures that the Torah lists as being a source of tumah if you touch it when it's dead. So our Gemara continues. Tsafa eino mitamo le'inyan sheretz. The issue of floating tumah, which was referred to in our Mishnah, does not apply to a case of sheretz. We'll elaborate on that a little more as we go on in the Gemara. Desanya. Sofek tuma tsafa. You have a doubt whether you had contact with the dead sheretz. That's the idea of sofek, doubt. Did you touch it? Touch what? Floating sheretz. Bein bekalim, bein bekarka. It's floating in water. The water is either in a vessel or the water is accumulated in the ground, like in a pit, in a pool that's built or dug into the ground. Tahora, you are considered tahor. Once again, the whole issue is doubt. Did I come into contact with the sheretz or not? Well, the sheretz is floating. Does it matter where it's floating? According to the Tanakama, it doesn't matter where it's floating. You are tohor. The Gemara at the top of Samach Dalid will give us sources for this. Reb Shimon Omer, bekalim temeo bekarka Torah. When there's an issue of doubt, however, it's a sheretz that was floating in water in a vessel, we will declare tumah. If it's doubt concerning a sheretz floating in water on the ground, then tahora. We continue at the top of Daf Samach Daled. My taimo de Tanakama. The Gemara asks, what's the basis for the Tanakama, who indicated that when it's a doubt concerning floating sheretz, he will always be declared tohor. Omer Yisrael bar Avudimi ksiv. There is a pasuk, and the Gemara is going to say one pasuk indicates one thing, and then another pasuk will be cited indicating to the contrary. We'll have to resolve the 2 psukim. So on the one hand, it says ksiv. It's bechol hasheretz hasharetz. This is pasuk mem gimel in Vayikra perek yud aleph. And on the side of the Gemara, we've included the pasuk which says al tishaksus nafsheisechem b'chol hasheretz hashoretz v'ositamu bohem v'nitmei sembom. Pasuk is speaking about avoiding defilement to the sheretz, and it said in the pasuk b'chol hasheretz hashoretz. What does that indicate? Kol mokoim shehu shoretz, wherever the sheretz is found, which implies even if it's in a floating situation, there will be tumah. Uksiv al haaretz. That's in pasuk mem daled, and that would indicate that the sheretz poses a problem of tumah only on the dry ground, literally. Ha ketzad. So how do you resolve these two? Vadai magoo, if you had definite contact with the sheretz, tome. There will be tuma wherever it is, even floating. Safek magoo, tahor. If there's a doubt whether you had contact with it or not, well, if it's floating, we will declare you tahor. For Rabbi Shimon my taimo, Rabbi Shimon, who said that even when there is doubt, we make a distinction between floating in a vessel versus floating in a pool. What's the basis for Rabbi Shimon? Omar Ula. Ksiv. Ach Ma'ayon, and it goes on to say in Posuk Lamed Vov, it says Yeh Tohor. And we have this quoted on the side, but Vayikra Perik Yudal Posuk Lamed Vov, Ach Ma'ayon Ubor Mikveh Mayim Yeh Tohor, V'nogea B'nivlosam Yitmo. So this Posuk Lamed Vov makes reference to Tahara, Uksiv Yitmo, and it also makes reference to defilement. Ha Ketzad. How does Rabbi Shimon resolve this? Safa, if you're dealing with Tumah that is floating. Bekalim Tome, if you have doubt, did you contact it, but it was found in a vessel, floating in water in a vessel, we say, sorry, we declare you, out of doubt, we declare you Tome. Bekarka, the sheretz found floating in a pool, which is similar to the example of the pasuk spoke about a ma'ayon, a bor. A ma'ayon is a spring, a bor is a pit. These are in the ground. So if the sheretz was floating in water in the ground, then tohar. Only then we can declare tahara. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.
This was a presentation of the Daf Map. We hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe to be informed of our other videos. For resources and more information, please visit our website at www.thedafmap.com.